The door swings open, and a black woman, dressed modestly, steps into a high-end car showroom. The moment she asks to see a luxury vehicle, the manager raises an eyebrow. The staff exchange glances. Then come the smirks and the taunts. They think she doesn't belong here. What they don't know is she's the true owner of this place. And today, she's not just here to shop. She's here to expose the rot at the very core of her own empire. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The Atlanta skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls of the Harper Lux Automotive headquarters. Sleek towers piercing the sky like monuments to ambition. But inside the corner office on the 47th floor, Elise Harper wasn't admiring the view. She sat at her mahogany desk, motionless, a single letter resting in her hand. Her thumb traced the fold over and over, like trying to soothe a wound that had just begun to bleed. "I visited your Palm Heights showroom last week," the letter began, excited to see the Supremes 12 in person. As a longtime admirer of Harper Lux, I was ready to invest in a vehicle that, to me, symbolized excellence and vision. But instead, I was made to feel invisible. Her eyes paused. The staff barely acknowledged me. When they finally did, I was told the model I asked about was not available for viewing. Minutes later, I watched a white couple, dressed no differently than me, be escorted, smiling, toward that same vehicle. They were offered champagne. I was offered the door. The letter was signed, James Carter, founder and CEO, Carter Culinary Group. Elise exhaled, slow and deep, the kind of breath you take when you feel something break not from shock, but from recognition. Harper Lux had always stood for more than just status. It was her legacy, her rebellion against an industry that never made room for people like her. Every curve of those cars was shaped by grit, every showroom opened by defiance. She hadn't inherited this empire, she'd built it, bolt by bolt. And yet, here it was, proof that the very system she thought she'd rewritten had reverted back to the same silent bias. It was born from. She didn't slam the letter down. She didn't call a meeting. She picked up her phone. She'd already started a quiet internal audit 3 weeks ago, assigning her chief of compliance to monitor discrepancies, flagged across regional showrooms. James's letter wasn't the beginning. It was confirmation. "Ethan," she said, "book me a flight to Miami, private, no press, and register the showroom visit under the name Camille Foster." There was a pause on the line. "Understood," Ethan replied without another word. She leaned back in her chair, eyes drifting toward a photo on the shelf. Her, years ago, in jeans and safety goggles, standing in front of the very first Harper Lux factory. Back then, nobody believed a young black woman could launch a luxury car brand and survive. But she didn't just survive, she soared. Now, she wasn't flying to Miami as a CEO. She was going as a customer, just another face, just another name. She wanted to see what happened when she had no title, no power, no armor. And if what she suspected was true, this wouldn't just be about one man or one showroom. It would be a reckoning. The sun over Miami glared like a spotlight as Elise stepped out of the rented black sedan. Palm Heights was everything she remembered. Manicured sidewalks, rows of palms like stage props, and boutique storefronts that whispered wealth in every detail. She adjusted the strap of her leather crossbody bag and glanced up at the Harper Lux showroom's sleek glass facade, polished chrome handles. And beneath the luxury, something uglier she could feel even before stepping inside. She'd gone to careful lengths to become unrecognizable. Her natural curls were tucked beneath a plain baseball cap, and a pair of oversized tinted glasses shadowed most of her face. She wore minimal makeup, no signature red lip, no defining earrings. Even her posture shifted slightly less poised, more hesitant. To anyone watching, she was just another woman trying not to be seen. And that was exactly the point. Inside, the air was cool, heavily filtered, the faint scent of espresso and waxed leather hanging like perfume. Everything was pristine, curated, perfect, and everyone inside white suits tailored to the millimeter, voices low and refined, conversations full of phrases like concierge financing and exclusive loyalty tiers. She approached the reception desk. The young woman behind it smiled, professionally tight. "Welcome to Harper Lux. Ma'am, may I ask the purpose of your visit?" Elise returned the smile. "I'd like to take a look at the Supreme Z12. I heard it's on display. The woman hesitated just a flicker, but it was there. The glance, the flick of her eyes to Elise's sneakers, her jeans, her skin, then a quick nod. Let me check with our showroom director. She stepped away. Elise waited. She didn't fidget. She didn't flinch. Moments later, he appeared. Paul Weston. She recognized him instantly, tall, tan, mid-40s. Salt and pepper hair combed with precision. His smile was all confidence and control, but his eyes scanned her like a riddle that didn't make sense. Paul had only joined Harper Lux 2 years prior. After a decade at a rival brand, he'd seen Elise's name, maybe glanced at a magazine cover once, but never met her in person, and certainly not like this. "Miss Foster?" he asked. "That's right. I understand you're interested in this at 12. "I am." He offered the kind of smile meant to look friendly, but came off more like a dismissal wrapped in charm. "Typically, we prioritize private viewings for clients with verified purchase histories. I hope you understand the Supreme line isn't just for everyone." She tilted her head, voice calm. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Paul didn't blink. "Let's just say we focus our attention where it's most promising." Behind him, the Z12 shimmered under showroom lights, untouched, unclaimed, and at that moment, a white couple walked through the door, no appointment, no hesitation. They were greeted like royalty, champagne, brochures, laughter. Elise turned back to Paul. "The first C," she said quietly. "Thank you." And then, without another word, she stepped to the side, took a seat in the corner lounge, and began to watch. Elise sat still, back straight, hands folded in her lap, her eyes tracking every interaction like a scientist studying a controlled experiment. She didn't need security footage or a secret shopper report. This showroom was revealing itself, layer by layer. In real time, a white man in golf attire walked in, no appointment, no questions. Within seconds, he was greeted by 2 sales associates, laughter flowing as easily as the espresso. A Latina woman followed 10 minutes later, elegant in posture, her blazer crisp, but she waited and waited. No one approached. When she finally asked about the Z12, she was politely guided toward the base models. Then came the real tell. A black man entered, tall, sharply dressed, a luxury watch peeking from his cuff. Elise leaned forward slightly, watching. He moved confidently toward a vehicle, something in his step that said, "I belong here." But the greeting he received was tepid, clipped. The salesman never offered a seat, never asked his name, only suggested he might find more options in the performance line, something more accessible. Accessible. The word thudded in Elise's chest like a hammer strike. This wasn't careless oversight. This was curation, a subtle, polished filtration process designed to protect an image of luxury that had nothing to do with income and everything to do with color. Across the room, Paul stood by his desk, flipping through a client folder, his posture relaxed. But when Elise glanced at him, their eyes met and held. He knew maybe not who she really was, but he knew she was watching, that she had noticed. And still, he offered nothing but the thin smile of someone who believed the system would always hold. But Elise had built Harper Lux for those customers, the ones overlooked, underestimated, side-eyed. Her mother, who cleaned houses so her daughter could build engines in their backyard. Her brother, who couldn't get approved for a test drive until he showed his Ivy League credentials. She remembered it all, and now she was living it again. She checked her watch, 47 minutes. Not a single follow-up, not even a brochure. She stood not in anger, in certainty, as she walked past the Z12. She didn't even look at Paul. She didn't have to. The silence she left in her wake was louder than any confrontation. Outside, the sun struck hard against the glass, casting reflections that almost blinded her. She crossed the street and ducked into a small cafe. Sliding into a window seat with a view of the showroom, she stirred her coffee absently, letting the bitter taste settle on her tongue. Inside, the pattern continued, curated smiles, invisible lines, decisions made in a glance. But Elise wasn't invisible, not anymore. This wasn't about one showroom. It was a rot in the foundation, and she had just found the crack. The cafe was quiet, save for the soft hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of ceramic against wood. Elise didn't sip her drink. She watched through the wide glass window, The showroom played out like theatre, scene after scene of who mattered and who didn't. But then something shifted. A young woman stepped into frame, mid-20s, auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail, beige blazer pressed crisp against trembling shoulders. Elise had noticed her earlier. Sophie, her name tag had said, hovering near the reception desk, always watching the sales floor a beat longer than the others, her eyes flicking toward Paul with just enough hesitation to betray discomfort. Then came the moment. A black mother entered, graceful, smiling, a little boy at her side holding her hand with wide-eyed wonder. The woman pointed gently toward a sleek coupe displayed near the front. Sophie nodded, her hand halfway to her tablet, a spark of movement that said she was ready to help. But Paul appeared out of nowhere, like a shadow cast across glass. He leaned in, said something low, his face polite but his eyes cold. Sophie froze. Then she stepped back. Elise's jaw tightened. The woman and her son waited and waited. No one came. After a few minutes, they quietly turned and walked out, the little boy casting one last look at the car before disappearing through the doors. That was the moment. Sophie stood there, shoulders stiff, her fingers clenched around her tablet, like it held the weight of her conscience. Elise didn't wait. She stood, tossed a 20 beneath her untouched drink, and crossed the street with purpose. Inside the showroom, the air was just as still as before, but now it felt charged, electric. Sophie looked up, startled, as Elise approached. "I was hoping you could help me," Elise said, voice smooth, steady. Sophie blinked. "Which model were you interested in?" Elise didn't break eye contact. "There's 12. It's still right there, isn't it?" Sophie's breath hitched, eyes darting toward Paul. "That one's reserved," she said softly, but her tone didn't carry conviction. "No, it isn't," Elise replied, "and you know it." Sophie's lips parted. She looked like she wanted to say something, to tell the truth. But then Paul's voice cut through the space like a scalpel. "Sophie," he called, calm, controlled, dangerous. Both women turned. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, walking over with the same smug confidence he wore like cologne. Sophie hesitated. "No, sir." Paul smiled. "Excellent. Because we wouldn't want to confuse intentions." He turned to Elise, the mask barely holding. "As I mentioned before, this line requires a certain history, a deeper sense of brand alignment." Elise almost laughed at the euphemism, but instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a simple white card, and set it on the desk. No title, no logo, just a number. Sophie's eyes flicked to it. "If you ever want to talk," Elise said quietly, "call me." And then she walked out, this time not with silence, but with a name Sophie would never forget. Sophie sat in the driver's seat of her compact car, parked beneath the dim glow of a flickering streetlight behind the showroom. The engine was off, but her heart was racing, like she was halfway down the freeway. She held the business card in her hand, its edges soft from the pressure of her grip. The name printed in small, elegant type whispered louder than any raised voice could have. Elise Harper. She knew who that was now, the founder, the face, the storm they all pretended didn't exist. She leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed, letting the weight of it all settle into her chest. She'd always known something was wrong from the way certain clients were flagged before they even stepped through the door, to the unspoken expectations about who gets the good coffee. But watching Paul so casually push that mother and her son away, that had broken something. It had made every excuse Sophie had ever given herself feel like poison. She opened her eyes and looked at the card again. Just a number, no title, no pressure. But Sophie knew if she dialed, there was no turning back. Her fingers hovered. Then, without letting herself think, she tapped the number into her phone and hit call. 1 ring, 2. "This is Elise." Her voice was calm, like she already knew Sophie would call. "It's me," Sophie said quietly, from the showroom. A pause. "I'm glad you did," Elise replied, softer now. "Do you want to talk?" Sophie swallowed. "Not here. There's a cafe on Westview. Quiet. You know it. I'll be there in 20. Sophie ended the call and sat there for another moment, her hand still shaking as she turned the key in the ignition. 25 minutes later, they sat at a back table beneath low-hanging lights, the noise of clinking mugs and distant jazz filling the air between them. Sophie didn't speak right away. She stared at the tea Elise had ordered, untouched. "I shouldn't be here," she said finally. But you are, Elise answered, not judging, just naming the truth. Sophie nodded slowly, eyes rimmed red but dry. You don't understand, she whispered. It's not just one bad guy. It's how we're trained. Unwritten rules. If you spend too long with someone who doesn't look the part, Paul pulls you aside, says you're wasting time, that you're making the brand look too accessible. Elise leaned forward slightly. So the bias is policy, just never written down. Sophie gave a bitter laugh. Exactly. Elise didn't blink. Would you be willing to stand by that? Not publicly. Not yet. But if I move forward, I need someone who's seen it from the inside. Sophie looked away. If I do, I lose everything. Elise's voice was quiet but certain. Or maybe you gain something bigger. Sophie didn't answer, but she didn't walk out either. And in the silence that followed, something shifted, not loud, not sudden, but permanent. Sophie barely slept. The night echoed with everything she'd just said, the weight of truth, the fear of being seen, but she couldn't take it back, and deep down she didn't want to. By morning, the tension had taken physical form, tightness in her chest, a flutter in her stomach, fingers that refused to stop fidgeting. As she stepped into the showroom, everything looked the same: polished floors, cars gleaming like trophies, colleagues smiling plastic smiles. But Sophie felt like the only one who knew the building was on fire. Paul noticed her the second she walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just watched, his eyes cool, calculating. He was always good at spotting shifts in energy. He could smell disloyalty like a wolf senses fear. Around noon, the call came, his voice over the intercom. Sophie, in my office. The air turned heavier. She walked slowly, legs stiff, the hallway stretching like it never ended. When she stepped inside, he was already seated behind his desk, hands folded neatly, an artificial calm plastered across his face. Close the door. She did. Paul leaned back, voice low but edged. Tell me something, Sophie. You've been here a while. You understand how this place works. So I'm going to ask you one time, have you been speaking to anyone outside this building about internal matters? Sophie didn't flinch. No. His eyes narrowed. Because if I find out otherwise, it won't just be your job at risk. People in this industry talk. No luxury brand wants someone who can't be trusted to keep their mouth shut. She said nothing. Paul stood slowly, walked to the window behind him, hands clasped behind his back. You know, he said softly, people like you, you're lucky to be here. This business wasn't built for everyone, but I gave you a chance. I expected loyalty. He turned back, face sharpened now. So I'll ask again, did you speak to anyone? Sophie stared at him, chest rising and falling slowly. No. Paul didn't blink. He just smiled, that thin, empty smile. Then we have no problem. You can go. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, his voice sliced through the quiet. But if I find out otherwise, Sophie, I won't just fire you. I'll make sure the next place you apply knows exactly who you are. Sophie walked out without responding. But in her chest, something snapped. Fear had always been her leash, but now it burned. Back at her desk, she pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with new purpose. She texted Elise 4 words. He's starting to dig. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of being caught. She felt ready. Elise read Sophie's text as she stood in her hotel suite, the sun bleeding gold across the Manhattan skyline behind her. He's starting to dig. 4 words. Heavy with urgency, laced with risk. Elise didn't flinch. She had expected this. Paul wasn't the type to sit still when his power was threatened. He would sniff out any crack, any whisper. And now the clock was ticking. She dialed Nathan. He picked up before the second ring. It's happening, she said. He didn't ask what. I've got the video ready, clean cut, subtitles, time-stamped. When do you want to drop it? Not yet, Elise said, staring out at the city that had made her and tried to unmake her so many times. First, we test their threshold. Let's make them sweat. That afternoon, an anonymous email landed in the inboxes of Harper Lux's senior board members. Subject line, urgent inquiry regarding showroom practices. The email came from a burner account, masked as a journalist's address. It contained no accusation, only questions polished, neutral. Corporate, friendly. But the words were sharp beneath the surface. We've received tips regarding differential treatment of customers based on racial profiling at the Palm Heights showroom. Would your office be willing to comment before we publish our findings? The response was immediate. By morning, Paul's phone lit up with a call from corporate. He answered, feigning calm. We're getting questions. The voice on the other end said coldly, something about racial bias. Do you know anything about this? Paul's throat tightened. Rumors, probably from disgruntled ex-staff or a customer with a chip on their shoulder. It's baseless. You better be right. The voice snapped. Because if this turns into a PR storm, we're not covering for you. Click. Paul stared at the phone in silence. His carefully constructed kingdom was shaking, but he wasn't going to let it fall. He gathered his managers that afternoon, doors locked, voices low. I want everything scrubbed, he hissed. No internal emails mentioning screening. No files that imply selective service. Nothing. You hear me? They nodded, unsure, nervous. Sophie had been quietly reassigned to observe and learn during management meetings, a gesture Paul once framed as mentorship. No one ever questioned her presence. Today, her smartwatch was recording everything. That night, she transferred the audio file to a secure folder. Then she opened another document, screenshots of emails, annotated meeting notes, a timeline of names and directives, evidence, not just words now, not just stories, proof. She stared at the folder, heart pounding in her ears. This was it. Once she sent this, there was no erasing it. She didn't hesitate. She sent it to Elise, to a journalist Nathan trusted, and to a board member who'd once told her quietly during a holiday party, if you ever see something that shouldn't be happening, don't let it slide. She didn't, and with one click, silence became a weapon. The whisper had turned into a siren. The storm had begun. The leak hit like a lightning strike at dawn. The article dropped at 6:02 a.m. on a rising. Monday, inside Harper Lux. Leaked emails reveal pattern of racial profiling at luxury showroom. The byline read, Nia Carter, an investigative journalist known for torching reputations with facts, not speculation, within minutes. The headlines surged across social platforms, then splashed onto morning broadcasts. But it wasn't the headline that shook the industry. It was the evidence, screenshots, audio clips, internal memos, all pointing to a disturbing, deliberate policy. Paul's voice, sharp and undeniable, played in one damning clip. We're not here to waste time on window shoppers. If they don't look the part, we steer them elsewhere. Period. Corporate scrambled. The board called an emergency session before sunrise. Lawyers were awakened. Damage control memos were drafted and shredded in the same breath. Meanwhile, in her suite, Elise sat at the edge of her bed, phone in hand, eyes calm as the world burned around her. She wasn't surprised. It had all gone exactly as she'd planned. Sophie's courage had opened the door. The rest was inevitable. Nathan had seen murmurs about Palm Heights before Yelp reviews, mysteriously disappearing. 2 interns quitting midweek. One anonymous message saying, check who gets offered coffee. But without evidence. It had all been smoke. Now it was fire. Nathan called, voice breathless. They're hemorrhaging. Investor calls are flooding in. Journalists are circling like hawks. That file you sent, it's wildfire. Let it burn, Elise replied softly. At Palm Heights, the air was suffocating. Employees huddled in corners. Phones buzzing non-stop. Customers who had test drives scheduled cancelled without a word. Sophie arrived at her desk to find eyes on her, some with suspicion, others with admiration, but none knew for sure. Paul did. He just hadn't proven it yet. He stormed through the floor like a man chasing ghosts, barking orders, denying press interviews, snapping at his assistant. But his kingdom was crumbling under the weight of truth. By noon, the fallout was systemic. A shareholder consortium issued a public statement demanding an investigation. Influencers who once flaunted Harper Lux vehicles posted videos denouncing the brand. One by one, the dominoes fell. But the real tremor came when Elise's face appeared live on a national news special. She wasn't behind a desk. She wasn't reading a press release. She was standing in front of the flagship Manhattan showroom, calm, direct, unwavering. I didn't build Harper Lux so it could become a velvet rope club for the chosen few, she said, eyes locked on the camera. I built it for anyone who could afford excellence. What we've seen is not a fluke. It's a rot. And rot doesn't stay buried, it spreads until someone cuts it out. Her voice held no theatrics, just truth, sharp, clear, irrefutable. And that's what we're doing. Starting today, the speech went viral within hours, and in the boardroom, where silence once reigned, pressure became panic. Paul wasn't a manager anymore. He was a liability, radioactive, cornered, and now publicly exposed. The echo had reached the top, and no amount of polish could hide the cracks in the glass. The boardroom felt colder than ever. Manhattan sparkled behind glass walls, but no one looked out. All eyes were on Elise, and on the man who'd built his empire on exclusion. The chair of the board, Leonard Baxter, a man known for his measured words and cautious tone, cleared his throat. We're not here today to debate opinions. We've all seen the footage. We've all read the reports. The question before us is clear. Can Paul Weston continue to represent the values of Harper Lux? Paul stood. I built that showroom into a profit machine. I judged who was serious. That's not bias, it's business. The room stayed silent, not convinced, just tired. A murmur rippled across the table. Elise didn't flinch. She waited, hands resting on the table, gaze fixed on the man who had tried to erase people like her with a smile. Paul continued, voice rising. This witch hunt, it's about power. Let's not pretend otherwise. You give her this win, and tomorrow it's something else. Then, another head rolls. Where does it stop? He sat back down, breathing heavier now, eyes flicking toward allies who suddenly wouldn't meet his gaze. Elise rose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This isn't about me, or even about Paul. This is about whether we still believe that the people who walk through our doors, regardless of color, accent, or outfit, deserve to be seen, heard, respected. She let that settle. Then she added, Paul isn't just a man who made mistakes. He's the face of a system that rewarded exclusion and silence. Her eyes swept the room. What we do today will echo through every dealership we own. The silence was weighty. Then Leonard said, We'll vote now, board members only. One by one, hands were raised. Names called, tension climbing like a slow heartbeat. When it was over, Leonard looked down at the tally, then up. By a vote of 11-4, Paul Weston is hereby terminated from his position, effective immediately. The breath Paul had been holding came out as a bitter laugh. You think this fixes it, he muttered. You think tossing me out makes the rest of you clean? No one answered. 2 security officers stepped in, and Paul stood, straightening his tie one last time. He paused at the door, looked back at Elise. You'll regret this. Elise held his gaze unshaken. Only if we stop here. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the first stone fell in a wall that had stood for decades. The broadcast studio lights were blinding, but Elise Harper stood steady beneath them, every word she was about to say etched with purpose. The room was silent, cameras rolling live across every major network, streamed to phones, laptops, and TVs around the world. Behind her, the Harper Lux logo shined not as a symbol of prestige, but now of reckoning. She took a breath, not for nerves, but for clarity. Then she began. Today isn't just a milestone for this company. It's a turning point for an industry. Her voice was calm, composed, but carried the weight of everything she had fought for. What happened at our Palm Heights showroom was not an isolated incident. It was the reflection of a culture, one that has quietly told too many of us that luxury, excellence, and belonging are not ours to claim. That ends now, in the crowd below. Sophie stood no longer a shadow in the back office, but a woman who had dared to speak. Ethan was beside her, nodding slowly, arms crossed. James stood further back, phone lifted, recording what he knew would be history. Elise continued, We are not erasing the past. We are confronting it. And from this moment on, Harper Lux will operate under a new standard. She turned slightly, and the screen behind her shifted to reveal bullet points, real changes. Not PR spin, mandatory anti-bias training across all showrooms, an independent oversight board with public reporting, a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination at every level of leadership, and a newly established customer equity division, headed by none other than Sophie Clark. Sophie's eyes widened in the crowd. Elise's gaze met hers. The message was clear. This wasn't just her victory, it was theirs. Elise faced the cameras again. Some have asked why I didn't just walk into that showroom and announce who I was. Why I didn't demand the respect tied to my name. Her voice dropped slightly, more personal now. Because I needed to know what happens when someone walks in without power, without status, without a famous face or expensive shoes. I needed to see who we are when no one is watching. She paused, letting the silence land. Then, with a fire in her eyes, she delivered her final line. I didn't build this company to be a gatekeeper. I built it to break the gates down. The room erupted. Applause thundered not just in the studio, but across the country as the clip went viral, shared by celebrities, reposted by activists, dissected on news panels. Harper Lux, once seen as part of the problem, was now leading the charge. Other companies scrambled to respond, but Elise wasn't watching them. She stood by the window later that night, skyline glittering in front of her, Sophie's appointment letter still warm in her hand. The battle had been ugly, the cost high, but she had reclaimed what was hers, not just her name, her company, but her voice, and the world had finally listened. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.